Hi everyone, this is Bibi Lorenzetti of Ashtanga Yoga Newburgh, and I am back with you for part 2 of a 5-part video series on healing anorexia through Ashtanga Yoga. I am really excited to be here with you. I'm really excited that you're here with me. It's taken 17 years to get to a place where I could share my journey and make it accessible enough that it can enlighten others to follow along and to believe that healing is possible through being disciplined and through having a self-practice and learning slowly to be strong within yourself without the help of necessarily others, even though the help of others is always useful and always has a place in the journey. So, to dive into today's topic, how to heal through Ashtanga Yoga, as in the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, and how these 8 limbs enable the recovery of the healing process. So, big topic. I'm going to try to keep it simple so that you can use the material. Please stick through the whole video, and you can pause it, begin again, and try to use the material as best as you can, and please reach out with questions. So, how to heal through the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, and what does the healing process look like? So, the big thing about Ashtanga Yoga and it being a recovery practice, a healing practice, is that it is a practice that it is traditionally done as a 6-day-a-week practice, meaning that there is 1 day of rest, and then we get lucky with moon days when they happen to be not on resting days, so that adds another 2 rest days a month. And the fact that it is a 6-day-a-week practice means that you have to show up for yourself on a daily basis, right? And you have to face doing the same thing every day and with a different mind every day, a different body every day, right? We are continuously changing, we're continuously evolving, and life is continuously happening at us, or to us. So there is nothing that is going to be the same on a daily basis. There's always slight little differences. And because of these slight little differences, we continue to evolve through a practice that is essentially the same every day. It grows over the years, but there's a lot of repetition involved as the growth happens slowly over time. So it being a daily practice in itself is already a big lesson for a person recovering from anorexia. It gives us a chance to show up every day for ourselves, and in that showing up, it gives us the opportunity to view our mind on a daily basis, view the content of our mind on a daily basis, and see how the choices that we make during the day and at night affect our practice the day after. So we continuously have, day in and day out, we have this opportunity to see how our choices, our actions, our thoughts are affecting us. And if you are recovering from anorexia, a lot of the time there's tiredness and there's a need to be pushed, right? So this leads me into the second reason why Ashtanga Yoga is great for recovery, and that is that you're showing up not only for yourself, but you're showing up because there's a teacher there that's holding you responsible, right? And if it's a good teacher, the teacher will make sure and point out when you're not there. Right? So all of a sudden, you're not just doing something for yourself, which can be a little bit challenging at the beginning of the recovery, because there's shame, or there's resistance, there's pushback, there's a lot of obstacles that get in the way that are all up here in the mind, right? So having a good teacher, a good space, a good community to show up to is something that is really going to help you a lot along the way. So make sure that wherever you go, you make a connection, you make a relationship with not only the teacher, but the community. You make sure you feel good in the space, because this will be your initial kind of nest of growth out of your current self and into your healed and wholesome self. So it's a 6-day-a-week practice. You're showing up not only for yourself, but for your teacher. It's a routine, right? So anorexic people, or those of us who have an anorexic mind, we love routine. And we love routines. Whenever we're stuck in that anorexic state, the routines tend to be really degrading, and really harsh on ourselves, and they tend to keep us into this state of smallness, into this state of fear. So we need to learn how to build new healthy routines. And so Ashtanga Yoga, because it is a 6-day-a-week practice, becomes a routine, and it becomes a routine that over time will actually ask you to develop more routines, right? It will be a natural progression into different routines of self-care that will support your journey with the practice, right? So it starts with a physical routine that you come to at the same time every day in the same place. And it teaches you on how to build a routine that feels good for your body, that is positive for your mind, and that makes you feel good. So it's important that you observe this aspect of routine, and that you see where else you can build routines throughout the day. So for example, as I had mentioned, I wanted to tell a little bit of my own story. When I first began practicing Ashtanga Yoga, there was this phase where I was really good about showing up for myself because of a third entity, which is the teacher. And I had that really down. But once I left that space, there was this big void, this sense of like, now what? I'm back to the state of like uncertainty and loneliness and separation, and I don't know what to do with myself. So it was two very different sensations. The moment I got up, there was this kind of like high of like, oh, I'm going to a place where I know I feel good, I know I feel safe, but then there was no structure after that, right? And so the more you begin to practice, the more you will want to not only be aware of this feeling and not let it take over, but begin to investigate what you can do for the time that comes after that. So at the beginning, I would go home, and on a good day, that kind of high would last for a few hours. So I would make sure that I had like a nice nourishing meal before the high kind of wore off. And then maybe I would force myself to take a walk, right? Because at the beginning, you kind of have to trick your mind into not going into anorexic mode, which means that there has to be an element of like awareness, but proactive disconnection from the feelings, right? So you can either journal the feelings, or you can take a walk, or you can do something that is active so that you don't get stuck in the feeling or in the emotion, but you kind of work it out through movement, or you let it express itself in some way or form. Some of you may want to paint, some of you may want to read, some may want to write, some may want to like meet up with somebody. So you need to find your way to feel like you're continuing to be at home, even though you've left the space of your practice. And so as time went by, I made sure to have little routines throughout the day. And there was a long period of time where like the nighttime would be the time where like all the demons would kind of come back, right? All the insecurities, all the fears, all the attachments would kind of just like download onto my brain, and I didn't know what to do with it, right? And so that's when I kind of started to get really curious. Curiosity is a very important part of recovery, right? I started to get curious as to what it was that would nourish me. As everything that you do has to be a nourishment, and it doesn't need to only come from food, right? At the beginning, actually, it's not coming from food. It's coming from learning what nourishment is, which means what feels good for you. And so I investigated and I tried different things. I tried going to a movie. I tried cooking for someone else. I tried going out for a walk. I tried painting. I tried to all kinds of classes, right? For me, the big element was I needed to busy myself with something that felt good, so that I didn't just sit on my feelings and put them into either eating, binge eating, and then feeling bad and purging, or not eating and just being aggressive in the way that my thought process was. So you need to really be proactive about what you're going to do with your free time. So building routines, very important. Fourth step is learning about discipline, which automatically comes with practice, right? We're going to look at it later in the niyamas. Discipline, tapas, is a very big element of Ashtanga Yoga. You need discipline to show up. You need discipline to do the same thing every day. You need discipline to put your whole self to learning one thing at a time, right? So discipline yourself. Force yourself to do things that are hard, that require a certain kind of presence, right? So to give you a personal example, I did not, like, my mind would want to gear towards eating things that were sweet, even though later it meant that I felt guilty because I didn't eat the whole day, right? The body automatically needs sugar because it's the easiest form of energy. So the routine, I got curious. I did some studying. I did some researching. I researched a lot into how does the body generate energy for itself, right? And so I began to eat maybe a piece of toast with a piece of avocado, or I began to make a plate of lentils, or I began to eat something green, like eat an apple before I ate, eat a green apple before I ate whatever I was gonna eat, right? So you start adding in something that feels safe because you've investigated, you've gotten curious, and you've kind of mastered this piece of information, and so you can trust it, and you make it part of your routine, right? And so in that way, you discipline yourself out of old habits into new habits. And the practice of Ashtanga Yoga has a certain rigidity to it, right? In order to stick to the routine, you have to be kind of rigid with yourself. Like, there's certain ways that you do things and you don't bend the rules, right? Especially if you have an able body, you have to do things in a certain order. So because the practice is so rigid at the beginning, again, depending on the person, there needs to be there's like a softening that happens outside of your own personal life. So you become rigid in your practice, but you begin to see, okay, I'm being rigid and disciplined here. I can kind of soften a little bit in this area over here, right? And so you begin to choose and see, like, if I'm putting all this effort, I get tired. So I need to kind of rest and digest later on. I need to, like, nourish that part of me that feels tired later on. So there's a sense of, like, okay, the rigidity is here. Now I can trust and take a little bit of rigidity out of here, which is like how I eat, how I feed myself. So there's this beautiful shift of rigidity that goes from your mind, your anorexic mind, into your practice self, right? And that's good because you need that energy, that disciplined, rigid energy to begin and learn about the practice. And then eventually, the other step that helps is the flexibility, right? In Ashtanga Yoga, we, through the practice, we begin to generate flexibility of the body first, right? Our limbs become flexible, which means there's more circulation within the whole body. There's more prana, there's more movement, and therefore there's more movement, there's more oxygen, there's more space, there's less rigidity in not only the physical body, but also the emotional body, the nervous system, and the mind, right? So all of a sudden there's more flexibility towards more compassion, more space for love in our thought processes, right? So something that before was so rigid and so set in its way, and now all of a sudden we look at it and we're like, okay, well, maybe I can allow myself to go have lunch with this person, and I can be okay with that, and I can maybe not eat at the time that I used to eat, but I can shift that a little bit and eat a little later or eat a little earlier, right? And I say this because in my own personal journey, there was a time, especially at the very beginning, where I alienated myself completely from any kind of social gathering where eating was involved, right? So I would make all kinds of things up to not participate, to not go. And it was very hard because all my friends would get together, or all my family would get together, and I would be at home sitting trying to let time pass so that then I could join later on and not have to deal with not eating in a group, right? So this is a very alienating and painful thing to do to yourself, right? And so the flexibility piece in that comes with making a new relationship with yourself where you make little deals. Like, if you, talking to that part of your mind, if you let me go to this dinner tonight, I promise you that I will take a walk, an extra walk tomorrow, right? And you mark in your conscious aware mind, you mark that at some point you're gonna just go for dinner and you're not going to go for the walk, right? So you allow compassion and flexibility in, and you make small little deals with yourself so that your anorexic self feels comfortable, feels not threatened. And eventually it'll trust you enough that it'll just forget about it. It'll just be like, okay, she's going to be okay. And she'll leave slowly. She'll let you be, or she or he will let you be, right? But at the beginning, she's gripping so hard that you have to kind of teach her to trust you, teach her to see that there is another way and that it's going to be okay. So that's flexibility. And then looking at the 8 limbs, we have yama niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. But we begin with asana, right? We start this journey through the physical, because the physical is what we can relate to as in this incarnation. We relate to the world and to others through this physical vehicle. And we identify ourselves through this physical vehicle. We can see ourselves, we think of ourselves as this. Yet this whole process is to learn of yoga, which helps in the healing, is to realize that this is temporary and it's changing, and we can't rely on it. We can only do our best to maintain it in its full health and its best health, and we can nourish it and we can love it and we can show compassion to it so that it can hold and carry our spirit. And then we can do our work in this world, right? If we're stuck in an anorexic mind, all of our energy is going towards, how can I keep myself small? How can I hold myself in fear? Instead of going into, how can I be of service? How can I do my duty as a human here in this lifetime, right? So you can see the suffering that goes with that, like not being able to do your own duty, but being stuck, like keeping yourself small and disconnected. It's very sad. The more I talk about this, the more it really truly saddens me to think that not only I put myself through it, but there's loads of humans at this moment that are going through it, and when they could really be putting their gifts out into helping the world be a better place, right? Okay, so anyway, asana. We work on the physical form to take away any pain, any physical pain, so that we can sit, and in that sitting, we can begin to have a sense of our breath, right? And that's the fourth limb, pranayama. We can begin to feel and control the movement of the breathing, of the breath. And we can let the mind rest on that movement of the breath, right? The mind and the breath are very connected. When we're breathing, when we have a shallow breath, our mind is very fast paced and it controls us. When we can begin to deepen and extend the breath, right, the patterns of the breath, then all of a sudden we are tapping into the parasympathetic system. We are tapping into a more like rest and digest, spacious existence. So with asana, we begin to create the connection between the mind and the body. With pranayama, we begin to connect the mind and the breathing. We begin to connect, we begin to control our minds. And when we can begin to control our minds, then we go into pratyahara, which is the fifth limb. And yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, yeah, the fifth limb. And pratyahara is the moving inwards of the senses, right? It's gathering everything and drawing it in. So it's being able to control everything that is going outwards. We're drawing it in. So all of a sudden we are in this communion of the self. We are in this inwards space, and we can act with more awareness from here, which leads me into the yamas and niyamas, which are the first two limbs. Yama, there's 5 yamas: ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. Ahimsa, I'm just going to quickly point out one little thing per yama because otherwise I could go on for days. Ahimsa is non-harming, right? And for this specific outlook of it, non-harming, so all the actions that you do in this journey towards healing are to learn how to not harm yourself, right? We are, the anorexic mind is created to turn everything into like a self-harming action. So we have to unlearn that, and we have to learn to take actions that are nourishing, that are compassionate, that are loving. And so not only in thought, but also in action. So we want to generate non-harmful thoughts towards ourselves. And at first, I remember there was a period of time where and it was like maybe like the second or third year into the practice, where I began to, for every negative thought or word that I generated in my mind about my body, I would flip it and I would find a positive, empowering, nourishing statement. And it took about another year for it to turn into how I would view myself. And then it was more of the times when I would have positive thoughts towards myself than the negative thoughts. So it takes a lot of, again, discipline and repetition and flexibility and call to action. Samastitihi, right? Standing in evenness in the moment. Hatha Yoganushasana, the practice begins now. So with each time you catch yourself saying something negative, flip it over, put it into positive, and continue to do that over and over and over again until it becomes a second nature. Satya, being truthful with yourself. So being really aware when you're doing actions that are harmful, stop and do something that is good. And the beginning of that might be you just stop doing that action. So I remember that in my own journey, there was a period of time at the very beginning of it where I would, at the dinner table, I would chew, and then as soon as someone would turn around, I would like cough or put a paper towel to my mouth and I would spit it out. And then I would like throw it away later on. And it didn't take my parents very long to figure that one out, but I would lie. I would lie not only to them, but I would lie to myself that I was actually eating, because I thought just because my saliva was in touch with that, I was getting nourishment. And I would lie so much to others that eventually I would believe in it, right? And I would lie so much that it came to a time where eating a yogurt and a green apple a day in my mind meant I ate a whole day worth of meals. And the anorexic mind is so enticing and so drilling that you end up believing it. You end up really believing that you ate too much. So it's unlearning that. It's finding the truth, observing others that are healthy and wholesome, and recognizing this is the truth. This is the not truth. And slowly making little contracts with yourself to see, how can I be more truthful? How can you do that, for example, is writing a food blog about what you ate today and comparing it to something that is you should actually be eating, and seeing that truth and sitting with it, and then doing little experiments of trying to add one thing in at a time and seeing how you feel. That's one way of doing it. So Satya Asteya is not stealing. So not stealing energy from yourself or others. Whenever you're not eating, you're depriving your body of energy. You're stealing your body of energy, and you're stealing your soul from doing its duty. You're stealing life from yourself, and you're stealing energy from others as well, because your family worries about you, your friends worry about you, so you're stealing energy and time from others as well. Brahmacharya is moderation, so everything in moderation. You don't need to jump from one end to the other, but also you need to be very truthful about what things you need to do less of or more of, and let the process be slow, let it evolve naturally, but be fearless and be absolutely honest with yourself, and be loving and be compassionate and be moderate in all of these things, right? There's a tendency of jumping into like, okay, I'm gonna love myself now, and you do the total opposite, and that's when sometimes you'll see anorexic people gaining a lot of weight and then going straight back down to where they were. You don't need to change anything. It's gonna take years to change something, but if today you can take one more bite of something, or you can have one less thought, one less negative thought, you've already won. You've already began your process of healing. You've already healed that little piece of you. So it's a process. Okay, aparigraha is grasping. So not grasping at this idea of who you should be or who you want to be, because you're never going to be that person, because that's not who you are. Who you are is beyond that. Who you are is the Purusha, is that inner light, inner soul that we all share, and is changeless and is eternal. So don't grasp to this idea of the physical body as something that is going to give you stability and a place to be, because that's only going to lead you to suffering. And then the niyamas, there's Saucha, Santosha, Tapa, Swadhyaya, Ishvara, Pranidhana. Shaucha, for the anorexic mind and for the healing process, it's important to cleanliness. It's important to look at this as like pure thoughts, thinking pure, loving thoughts, expressing pure, loving actions towards yourself. Yeah, if you can begin there, this is great. Santosha is contentment. So being content, learning to be content with what you have. So on the practice, you see contentment in the way that you see your body being strong. You see yourself showing up every day. So be content, explore the sense of contentment through your practice and learn of it, see where it comes from, and then seek it outside of the mat. Tapas is discipline. So we talked about that before, having discipline in your thoughts, the types of thoughts that you generate, having discipline in your actions, having a disciplined routine, having multiple disciplined routines. Swadhyaya is learning, self-study. So it's learning to be curious about who you are, reading books that are going to help you understand about the nature of the self, reading books that are going to help you understand what food is. And I'm going to be, hopefully soon, creating a list of books on my website as a reference. Amazing books from really knowledgeable people about food. I've read millions of books on this topic. I even ended up doing a health coaching course to understand and to really create a routine for myself that would be sustainable and that would be not given by an external entity, because as anorexic minds, it's hard for us to trust someone else, but for me to trust me, for me to know that the choices that I was going to make were going to be solid and were going to help me be established in health. Not just eat because people around me were telling me that I needed to eat and gain weight, but if I was going to do it, I realized that I wanted to heal by myself, and I wanted to look in the face all my demons and teach them that I had a better project for them, and that they were gonna eventually be grateful for it. So get curious, learn, pick up a book about food, pick up a book about fat, pick up a book about proteins, pick up a book about painting, I don't know, anything. But study yourself, study what you do, become an expert. And then lastly, Ishvara Pranidhana is putting your mind on God, the study of scriptures of God, which I'm going to translate here to read books that are enlightening, that help you come out of your small self. So books like the Bhagavad Gita, books like the story of the Ramayana, any book from Pema Chodron, any book from Sharon Salzberg, like read books that are enlightening, that are going to help you see life from a broader perspective, right? See life from a more spiritual plane. So these are the elements that come out of practice and that help you generate a plan for yourself. So to recap, so that you have like a list of these things: how to heal through Ashtanga Yoga. What are the 8 limbs? What of the 8 limbs enables the recovery and the healing process? 1, having a routine. 2, it being a 6-day-a-week practice, showing up for yourself, for your teacher, for your community. 4, having a discipline, creating a rigidity and a discipline that is on the mat and not off the mat, and seeing this discipline in your mind, in your actions, in your interactions. 5, having flexibility, or gaining flexibility, right? These are like the elements of the practice that will help the recovery. 6 is having a teacher, right? Finding a person that you can trust to do all these things in that space. 7 is the 8 limbs: asana, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Dharana, dhyana we didn't discuss because it's comes a little bit later on, but it's the sense of when you do all these things that we just talked about, there's a sense of being able to sit with yourself a little more, right? And so one of the great things about the practice of Ashtanga Yoga is that you physically exert yourself. You do such a great physical exertion that you, by the end of the practice, kind of are passed out. There's no more physical resistance, emotional resistance. Your nervous system just gives. And so in that state, everything that is moving, once you rest, begins to come back into its place. And everything that you don't need, everything that you're working on, at the beginning it's usually physical and dealing with nervous system things, it shifts, and anything that's been moved or circulated around, it kind of moves closer to leaving you, right? It goes outwards towards the outer boundaries of you, so that it eventually can leave your body, right? It be some kind of like physical ailment or a nervous system dysfunction, like what we're talking about, right? And it takes time, but like in that sitting, in that resting, everything comes back to its center, and what is no longer needed kind of departs. And then we can sit, then our mind can kind of like sit in its seat, right? Asana. And in that space, we can kind of feel a little bit more spaciousness between the thoughts. And when we get to that point is really when the big changes begin to come, because there is so much concentration, there is so much inward movement, so much pratyahara, that we can begin to really access these the codes of our mind, right? And we can begin to rewire those codes. So that's like after a year or maybe more of practice, you begin to access that stage where you can begin to really be an observer to your mind and begin to really see where you need to make changes, see where your thoughts are coming in, and feel detached from those thoughts. And in that detachment, you can let go and you can live in the present moment without those thoughts. That's when the real healing begins to happen. And for me, really, that happened at the mark of the 4 years. I've now been practicing for 8 years. And I remember clearly that moment of when I started to do third series, and whenever I started to having a really established pranayama practice, I started to really see the difference in the content of my mind. I started to really see like the thought process and the space between the thought process and myself. I started to experience myself as the tadadrashtu swarupe avastanam. I started to see myself as the observer, the swarupe of those thoughts. And I started to see that the swarupa is actually the true self, right? My true nature, and it being separate from what was happening in my mind. And I think that the element of drishti also, which I haven't talked about, but the element of drishti is really important because it's placing your gaze somewhere. So we're placing the gaze at the nose, at the third eye, at the belly button, at the fingertip. We're learning to put our mind in one place. And we can do that over and over and over and over again. And so when we're trying to heal from anorexia, the same problem keeps coming up. We are scared of eating. We are scared of changing. And so that's kind of the drishti. I don't want to eat this because I'm scared that I'm going to get fat, or I'm scared I'm going to change. I'm scared I'm going to break my rules. And so you shift your drishti from that into, okay, I'm here and I'm breathing now. And you go with that. And so one drishti at a time, you solve things, right? Okay, so it's a lot of content. I hope that it's been useful for you, and I hope that you can, again, like sit on these topics, write them down, pick one thing that really resonates with you. You know, like in Mysore, my philosophy teacher always says, like, choose one sutra that speaks out and sit on it for as long as you need until it becomes yourself, part of yourself, and then choose the next thing, right? So don't feel like you have to understand all of this now, but choose one thing that spoke out to you today, write it down and become an expert at it, and then revisit this video and choose another thing and become an expert at that, and let it be a process. It's something that's good. It's going to take time, but having this information is really important so that you have kind of a roadmap and you understand why this is going to help you, and then you can make informed choices. So I love you all. I'm so grateful to be able to share this with you. I am here for you. I teach regularly in Newburgh, New York right now. I open my own shala, but I teach worldwide with my retreats and workshops that I do. So I hope to see you on one of my retreats. Retreats are a really wonderful opportunity to travel and get close together, feel like you're supported by a community of like-minded people, and really take the time away from your daily life to understand yourself, to build rituals, to look at your the content of your mind, look at how you deal with yourself, and be nourished for a whole week, right? With pure, delicious, amazing foods prepared by wonderful people, having a daily morning practice that's in gorgeous spaces, and just having the time away from your daily life so that you can kind of see yourself from another perspective. And when you walk away from it, you usually have this whole new baggage of information that you can apply to your life, to your practice, to whatever it is that you're kind of looking at. So this year I have a retreat coming up soon, March 29th, in Costa Rica, and I'm taking only 12 students. There's still a few spots open. You can check that out on my website. And then I'm doing a retreat in Portugal June 30th to July 7th, and that will be right on top, like we're a little north of Lisbon, in a beautiful villa in the hills, 10 minutes from the beach, and I'm taking 15 people on that retreat maximum. And then I'm doing an exclusive retreat in Mallorca, in Caladella, which is this gorgeous little calita, and the villa is like on a hill on top of the beach, and that will be reserved only for 8 people. And that's July 14th to July 20th. So again, please take some time to check them out, and I hope that you decide to join me. The best way to keep in touch with me is to sign up to my newsletter at bblorenzetti.com. I love you all.